Hi everyone, I'm Nozomi Okuma, moderator for this D2C session. For our guest, we are joined by Helena Hambrecht, co-founder and CEO of Haus. So welcome Helena, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and what Haus is?
Yes, so Haus is a new type of alcohol that we created for today's generation. We developed it to match the values of today's consumer and why they are drinking, which is more and more to connect with others and not to get wasted. We are also the first D2C liquor brand in America ever.
Okay, so how do a user drink Haus? Is it like on the rocks or?
Yeah, I can tell you a little bit more about what it is. So we created a new take on the traditional aperitif, which is a type of alcohol that's been popular in Europe for centuries and is just starting to gain awareness in the US. They're lower in alcohol so that you can have many drinks in a night without the consequences, which is very nice. And ours are quite different from anything that you've seen in the market. Ours are much less sweet and bitter than traditional aperitifs, and we use very fresh ingredients sourced from farms that we trust, and we don't use any suspicious additives that you find in most alcoholic products. And they're very easy to drink. So you can drink them on the rocks, you can mix them with soda or tonic, you can use them as the base of a low ABV cocktail. The thing that makes Haus and aperitifs really great in general is that they taste like a really sophisticated cocktail straight out of the bottle. So they're very, very easy to drink.
Okay, see, so how does it taste like, or do you have any flavors for it?
Yes, we have 8 flavors now. They taste a lot like the names that we have for them, like grapefruit jalapeno, lemon lavender. We named them in a very straightforward way so that you could have a really good idea of what they taste like, which is actually quite a change from the way aperitifs usually work. Really popular aperitifs include Aperol or Campari, and historically aperitifs have been all about hiding their recipes and hiding their ingredients, and you can't quite figure out what they taste like. We wanted to do the opposite and make it very, very clear what you could expect when you buy them.
Right. So do you have like a membership or a subscription model for your for Haus?
We do. So we sell Haus online. We launched it as an online only brand. And we also launched membership for people who drink Haus regularly. They exist. They have the option to ship between 1 and 6 bottles every month. And they could also get access to exclusive flavors and promotions. It's something that's quite simple, similar to other DTC memberships, but it's not something that you've seen in liquor before.
I see. So can a user choose what flavor they get each month?
Yes, they can, and they can change it whenever they want.
I see. Okay. So you said that Haus is one of the first alcohol D2C brands in the US. So can you tell us about why the alcoholic D2C brands hasn't picked up until recently?
Yes, there are no D2C liquor brands because it's illegal. It's crazy to say, but the laws in America have been very strict around liquor in particular since Prohibition. So if you're buying liquor online in the US, you're very likely buying from a website that sends a courier to buy it from a liquor store and deliver it to you. And that liquor store bought it from a distributor, and that distributor bought it from the producer. There are many, many layers to the system, but to you as the buyer, you may just think that you're buying it online, which is fine for you. But we can do it specifically because of an exception around grape-based aperitifs. It's a very strange loophole in the law where if you are mostly made of grapes and you're lower in alcohol, you can sell on the internet. And even then, it still took us a long time and a lot of money to become nationally compliant in every state. It's definitely not easy to do. And it's honestly why I believe we were the first to pull it off and why we still don't see any other major DTC brands in the liquor space other than us.
I see. So prior to founding Haus, what have you been doing, and how did you come up with the idea of building Haus?
Yeah, so I've lived many lives. I worked in Silicon Valley prior to Haus. I got my start running comms and biz dev at startups as an early employee. And then long story short, I built a brand consultancy and production studio that worked with everyone from Facebook to Google to Twitter to Uber. It was a good run, and I learned a lot about what it takes to build and launch brands. And so I never actually thought I'd launch a booze company. I bartended for many years, so that was my experience with booze in the service industry. But I launched Haus with my ex-husband, who is a third-generation farmer and winemaker. And we joke that it took a techie marrying a winemaker for Haus to exist, but it's true. You know, again, I come from Silicon Valley, where I watched every other industry get disrupted by D2C brands that really understood the values of the new generation and made products for them and sold directly to them. And as I'm sure you know, today's consumer cares deeply about what's in their products, whether it's food or beauty or clothes, you name it. They care about the quality, the authenticity, the transparency, and who they're buying from. But unfortunately, when you looked at alcohol, it's an industry that hasn't changed since Prohibition, and it is owned by corporations who decide what is in your cocktail or at your grocery store. And people have been stuck with alcohol products that are very conventional and honestly just don't work for them at this point. You know, products that make them drunker and more hungover than they need to be, products full of synthetic ingredients and refined sugar and food coloring, just stuff you don't feel good about drinking. So just a few years ago, everyone that I knew was complaining about drinking and how it made them feel, and the calories, that it got them too drunk, that it was messing with their sleep, but they didn't want to stop drinking. They just didn't know what to do about it. And it was enough to pique my interest as someone who was married to someone in the alcohol industry. And I started doing some research into the industry and what people were looking for, millennials, Gen Z, and it was just staggering. There was sitting here a $280 billion industry in America that was just sitting there stagnant with no innovation, and a whole generation that was looking for something different. So long story short, we set out to make the alcohol brand that we wanted to see in the world. And we believed that aperitifs was the way to do it. So we developed this new take on it, you know, this type of alcohol that's been popular in other parts of the world for a really long time, but was just starting to make its way to the US. And we knew that this was also a type of alcohol that could go to direct to consumer. And everyone in the industry thought we were stupid for wanting to do this. They didn't understand why we wanted to do things differently and not just go through traditional distributors and do the things the way that it's always been done. But for us, it was really obvious. Like, we wanted to sell directly to the drinker. That's who we were making the product for. And selling on the internet gave us the chance to really connect directly with our customer. And that relationship just has helped us make sure that we're making something that people want and that we continue to make the products that are best for them. So that's kind of the story.
Okay, thank you. So where are you in terms of traction and sales?
So, I mean, we've sold hundreds of thousands of bottles of Haus in just the 2 years that we've been around. It's been pretty incredible, honestly. I mean, I knew in my gut we were making something that would strike a nerve with people, but I never anticipated how quickly we would reach kind of the entire US. It's been amazing.
I see. So you ship to all around the America, like US, and not really overseas yet? Do you have a plan?
We have not officially shipped overseas, but I'm very excited about the day that we do.
Okay. So when you founded Haus, how did you get your first customers? Like, did you put up an online shop and like advertise it on Instagram or that kind of thing?
Yeah. So, you know, I had a long career in Silicon Valley that started with launch PR. I got a degree in media relations. So ironically, I knew exactly how to launch a brand because I used to get paid to do it for other people. So I had all of my ducks in a row in terms of what I believed we needed to have. You know, we built a really slick brand. We put a lot of care into it. We built a really beautiful teaser website. We got press lined up to write about the launch. And I think that we had a really successful launch with a lot of coverage, in part because no one had ever launched something like this before. Like, I knew it would be something exciting that people would want to write about. And I also knew this would resonate with my community in Silicon Valley. I'd actually just read a book by Simon Sinek called Start With Why. And it's about how people don't want to buy the what, they want to buy the why. Like, why will this product help them? Why does this product exist? So I wrote a Medium piece at launch that didn't say anything about what Haus was. I just talked about why I launched it and the problem that I was trying to solve. And that post went viral and drove a lot of our initial customer adoption.
I see. So who are your main customers? Like, what are they looking for?
Yeah, we actually have a very broad customer base. We capture everyone from Gen Z to millennials to boomers, which I think speaks to how few good options there are in alcohol. Like, the bar was really low. We're taking market share from liquor and wine. People are sick of drinking things that make them feel wasted and hungover, but they're also looking for a brand that meets their values, you know, from ingredient quality to brand aesthetic to sustainability. And we check all the boxes for them. So it's been really encouraging to see.
I see. So you were talking about the branding and how you were involved. So how important is branding to tech companies and especially to D2C brands? And what are the points you focus on branding on Haus?
Yeah, branding is important. I'm a huge believer in it. But branding without authenticity is only going to get you so far. Like, when we launched our brand, there were 0 brands that looked like us. And that was intentional. Like, every single brand decision that I made, from the colors to the type to the photography style, was very intentional, and it helped us tell our story. And I think every aesthetic decision you should do, it should really support the why of what you do, and it should serve the needs of your customer. You shouldn't go and just randomly pick colors and type that look good. Like, you should really put thought into how that ultimately serves the mission of what you're trying to do.
Right, okay. So last year and this year was pretty radical, I guess. So do you see any changes to customers' lifestyles or after, like before and after the pandemic? And how has it impacted your business?
Yes, many. Before COVID, we were growing entirely through word of mouth, and we were spending $0 on marketing. It was a big bet that I made that because alcohol and Haus specifically is a product that's meant to be shared, that if we made the experience really amazing from the start, the product would naturally spread from person to person as people shared it with their friends, which was true. It happened that way. And then COVID happened and people stopped gathering. So our organic word of mouth stopped. Speed of consumption also slowed down, where people would down a bottle of Haus in a night at a gathering before COVID. People were suddenly drinking alone in their homes. They'd slowly work through a bottle over many weeks. So it was definitely a hard new reality for us that we had to adjust to. We also had built this whole brand around gathering, and we had to figure out, like, oh gosh, what do we do now? But we adjusted. And, you know, another big bet was that people were going to start wanting to buy alcohol online. Like, that was an assumption that we made when we launched Haus. And COVID accelerated that behavior. And we were able to make the most of that as well. So we started marketing online, and we found a lot of success there. We were also fairly unaffected by the elimination of wholesale, unlike the rest of the alcohol industry, because we just didn't have any wholesale. We were only 6 months old at that point. So while most of the alcohol industry took a really big hit, we didn't have to worry about that, which was amazing. But overall, I think what helped us make the most of the pandemic is we were willing to move really quickly and adapt to the changes. We just had to make the most of it.
Okay, thank you. Just to change the subject, I want to talk about your fundraising. So in January 2020, you raised $4.5 million in seed funding, and in that, 10 funds and 100 individual investors contributed. I think that's like very unique, because I think the general advice to startup is to keep the cap table small, and especially in this early stage. So what was the idea behind that, and why did you choose that method?
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, it was because I couldn't have any other option. I had no choice. We cannot raise money like most DTC companies have because we're alcohol. It is just 1,000 times harder. Like, most funds have vice clauses preventing them from touching alcohol, and the rest have so little experience in the industry that they would just prefer not to go near it. So, you know, I knew tons of people in Silicon Valley. I knew tons of VC funds. I knew tons of investors. Most of them just couldn't touch it. So I had to kind of start from scratch. So I developed my own approach, which was basically non-existent at the time. I couldn't find any playbook that matched what I needed to do. But I just decided to raise on rolling notes and not worry about finding a lead. And I would just pitch everyone who would listen. I mean, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, and find the people who believed in what I was doing. And over time, I actually found a lot. So I've heard from a lot of people that my style of fundraising has inspired a lot of entrepreneurs to go and do the same. And I'm really glad to hear that. I think there's this misconception that you have to raise in a certain way, or you have to do certain things in certain ways, but it's just not true. I think if you're creative and really stubborn and work to find alternative ways of doing things, you'd be surprised at what you can figure out. So again, there's just no one way of doing anything. You've got to find what works for you.
I see. So was there any side effects of having a large number of investors?
You would think, but not really. No, on the contrary, I've heard horror stories about people having only one or two investors, and that those investors are psychopaths, or that they just make their lives really hard. Those are the horror stories that I end up hearing a lot, and I don't have to worry about that, which is great. I brought in people who believe in the brand, and a lot of people get to watch me build this in real time, which I think is pretty cool. And, I have a lot of people who are enthusiastic, hype people for the brand. So I would say for me, the pros have vastly outweighed the cons.
I see. So I think there's another way to fundraise is crowdfunding. So what do you think about that? And what advice will you give to D2C founders who's looking for fundraising?
Yeah, I think crowdfunding's amazing. I'm really enjoying watching the fragmentation of the investment landscape. And again, just knowing that there's not one way to do anything. And the more options for fundraising that are out there, the less anyone can gatekeep, who's going to launch companies, who's going to innovate, who has the opportunity to grow. I'm very excited about seeing all these new options. So especially if you're a consumer brand, it makes sense to have a lot of people on your cap table. Again, you're able to bring in believers who are consumers, and maybe they don't have $5 million, maybe they have $5,000. That's amazing that they can have some skin in the game and feel like they can go and work for you. There's a lot of upsides to it. So for me, I would say just go, try everything. You don't even have to have the conversation of, oh, do I do angels or do I do crowdfunding? Go try everything and just figure out what ends up working, you just have to keep trying stuff.
I think that's a great advice. And so your investors were kind of like your first customers as well. Is that the thing?
Yeah, I mean, there was a ton of overlap. Again, it was pretty much everyone who invested in Haus, it was their first alcohol investment ever. So they couldn't invest based on portfolio fit. They couldn't invest based on deep knowledge of the industry. They just had to invest based on whether or not they believed in the idea. And so the people that do invest, the pro of that is that I know that they're customers. I know that they're able to speak about the product. I know that they really enthusiastically believe in it. It's a nice thing.
Okay, thanks. So changing the subject back to wholesales, I heard you're starting to do wholesales as well?
Yes. So right now we're testing wholesale in California, and the plan is to go pretty hard on wholesale and open many new markets in 2022. It's funny, people think that we were launching D2C and that we were planning on being D2C forever and no wholesale, but we always planned to go into wholesale. It was just impossible for an indie brand in alcohol to do so. I mean, it's a crazy industry. It's impossible to break in. Historically, you need to be owned by a corporation to get that national leverage, to get in with distributors, to get into accounts. So as an indie, you're usually stuck just selling yourself to some restaurants in your home city or home state. You're not really getting anywhere. You're not ever getting that national penetration. So by going D2C, the plan was to build a national audience and build that brand demand that we could then go use to drive wholesale. We could go to distributors and say hey, it's not going to be hard for you to sell this. We have proof. People want us, accounts want us, and the plan worked. We now have hundreds of inbound requests from restaurants and retailers and distributors, which is truly unheard of in our industry. And we also have the data that shows us where we should be focusing our efforts down to literally the neighborhood. It's going to make wholesale possible for us in a way that's just not been possible for alcohol brands before us.
So you're creating like a new example in the alcohol industry. Is there any signs of the law to change or like?
I wouldn't be surprised if the laws start to open up. That was always our bet. I mean, the industry has been very resistant to change. They said no one wants to buy alcohol online. That's not true. People love to buy everything online. They just didn't want people to buy alcohol online. And unfortunately, for them, COVID made the behavior really normalized, and all of these different courier services and kind of in between, delivery apps have come about and normalized the behavior. So they're having to confront this dilemma where they're realizing, yeah, okay, people are actually buying this stuff online, and they're not making a lot of money on that because, again, there's like 5 different gatekeepers in that transaction where we're able to just go direct. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if things start opening up even more and somehow people are able to get more access. I mean, we're seeing it in the States with COVID. We've got to-go cocktails now at restaurants. Like, there were all of these rules that are just finally starting to loosen up, which I'm very excited about. It kind of feels like the Wild West right now.
I see. So what is your next plan in scaling your business? So can you give us a little bit more details of that?
Yeah, we're really just continuing to do what we set out to do, which is changing drinking culture by making better alcohol available to everyone. I grew up in rural North Carolina where we didn't have access to organic food, let alone, high quality alcohol. And still, if you go to an ABC store in North Carolina, it's unlikely you're going to find anything other than corporate products. And so we want to be that product. We started this mission by using the internet, and we're continuing that mission by trying to be available wherever our customers want us, whether that's at home or their local grocery store or their favorite bar. We believe that big changes in drinking culture and the alcohol industry are really just beginning, and we're really proud to help pave the way.
Okay, thank you. You have a background in the Silicon Valley and software companies. What is the most difficult part of handling a hardware, a physical product?
Oh God, I mean, supply chain. I think you'll hear every consumer brand right now talk about supply chain. You've got to make the thing, and it costs money to make the thing. And for us, we make it ourselves. We built out our own infrastructure. And again, these are obstacles that are very specific to the alcohol industry, but there were no, if we wanted to go to a factory and have them make it for us, those don't exist in booze. If you're a small brand, you make it yourself. And then you maybe get bought by a giant corporation and they bring you into their factory. There's no co-packers that could take our product and make it and scale with us. So we knew we had to build it ourselves. So we have 4 warehouses in Healdsburg, and it was almost impossible to raise money to build out warehouses and infrastructure. VCs don't necessarily want to put money into that kind of stuff. But we kind of did the impossible. I mean, we built out the infrastructure. We have this amazing production system that can scale kind of infinitely with us. But it was a hard road, and I'm very, very glad to be over that hump and start to, become a really efficient machine. I think that's the hardest thing. You, as a D2C brand, you have to figure out that side of the business. And it's really not cheap in the beginning. If it is, it's because you're taking a bunch of shortcuts. And so if you want to do what's best for the customer and what aligns with your values, it's usually going to be a hard road in the beginning.
I see. Do you see any brands that doing that successfully?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot. It's funny when I think about brands that I look to, or that, specific brand that I kind of idolize. It's funny, we didn't have anyone to copy, we were the first D2C brand. So we decided to do just about everything differently than what we'd seen in the industry. But that said, I took a lot of inspiration from a lot of places. I looked to the first era of D2C brands like, Warby Parker and Everlane and Away and Glossier, and how they really put the customer first and met their values. I have a lot of respect for how they approach things. I also look at the organic food movement and how they eventually took market share from conventional products across America. I look at a lot of industries and companies and use them to inform our roadmap. And that's kind of what I would recommend to anyone. Like, don't ever pick one company to aspire to. It's never gonna, it's not good, for you. And like, even if you tried to copy them, piece by piece, like you wouldn't become them because they just happen to do the right thing at the right time. I think if you pull inspiration from a lot of industries and really look to different companies that you admire for different reasons, then you'll figure out what you want to do.
Okay, thank you. So the last question is, what do you think is most important in scaling a D2C brand? This kind of overlaps with the last question, but if you have any advice for D2C founders.
Yeah, I would say just do what is best for the customer, like always. When you are torn between demands of employees or investors or whatever, like just do what is best for the customer. Like always think about them, their needs, their motivations, their problems. If you are solving a problem, you are going to be indispensable and you will be a good business. And again, I wouldn't take shortcuts either. Like don't copy other brands, don't use shitty ingredients, don't half-ass things. Like you have to serve the customer. And that is what is going to make your business work in the long run. And lastly, I would say, again, it's a lot harder than it used to be to build a D2C brand. And you really need to care about what you're building. If you do, it will show to the consumer and it will help you get through a lot of challenges ahead of you. So that's what I'd say.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's the end of our session. Helena, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.